All right. Welcome to this episode of the Zao Strength Podcast. Today we are joined by Coach Tyson Eckel, and the second time attempting this episode with, what's your last name again?
Chernin.
Mike Chernin. He's got a book called Strength Speaks, where he interviews athletes from around the world, I think, right?
Mostly U.S.-based athletes.
U.S.-based athletes on kind of how they approach training, how they think about training. You can check the link in the bio to pick that up. It's interesting because that's kind of, from what I could tell from the book, it seems to be a part of why I wanted to start this podcast with Tyson and as part of the company, because I was really interested in how powerlifters actually approach training. Because I'm not I love how scientists approach training and how researchers approach training. I think that gives us a lot of really cool opportunities. Listening and learning from research is really helpful, but at the same time, when you implement it with an athlete and it doesn't work, or the intention that you're trying to get from working with your athletes isn't resulting in the desired outcome, then what do?
Would do indeed.
And I think learning about different anecdotal approaches to training can really provide even more interesting approaches to training, because you get to test those types of things real time and observe the outcomes real time, and N equals 1 or maybe 20 or something. But if you combine all of the different ways in which people train, you can kind of dip your hand into different buckets whenever you want to, and you're probably going to get a response, And so anyway, that's a long intro on your book, but that's one of the reasons why I am most interested in having you on, is to learn about more how you approach training, because I know I've observed you in the gym since I was 17 when I first joined Los. And you always just kind of go hard, you're always doing something different. You seem to have a lot of fun when you're training in the gym. You seem to you have a different philosophy than I do. And I think, as we talked before the podcast, I think psychologically you found a method that works with your mind, Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and how you've come to exist in the strength world?
Sure. Well, I'd have to start in the beginning. I first walked into the gym when I was 19 years old, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what I was doing. But all I knew was that if I made it hurt and I did it hard, then it would feel like I was doing something. And that very day, I did, 20 sets of lunges, something like that. Just some dumb shit until I couldn't walk. And I shouldn't say I walked out of there, I limped out of there. And I was like, that felt like something. And it's been like that ever since. Yeah.
Just going in the gym. Man, that felt like something. All right.
I guess that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I have tried traditional classical programs, whether they're percentage based or RPE based or whatever, and they just bore me to tears. So I don't do them. I don't want to be bored to tears in the gym. It's a place to have fun.
I think that's really useful because, coaching clients is so much about matching a program or a training approach to their psychological tendencies. If a lifter is bored with their training, I have a tough time of seeing them making a lot of progress, because progress is kind of dependent on the fact that they continue.
Yes.
You can't get to that point if they're bored. Maybe, but only for some time. And they start losing motivation, and they find out that there are other things to do with their time that are more stimulating and kind of, meet them where they're at psychologically. And I know, Tyson, you work with people one-on-one, in person. I do it all online, so I feel like you almost have you could more rapidly make adjustments to client training as needed in real time, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about that?
Because I work with a lot of beginners, so a lot of people who haven't trained before, and so I mean, my first goal is just to find something that they'll feel competent loading themselves as soon as possible. Like I try, basically we do it, we build a day together and we do it until they feel like they can do it on their own. And then that becomes their solo day. It's like their responsibility. It's like their first pet or whatever. Their job to foster that. And then then the sessions that we do together become the more complex ones. And so usually I just find some variation of like the fundamental movements that they feel like they'll be able to like load and progress on their own and they feel confident on. And yeah, that's the starting point. And then after they have 2 solo days, and then the third day with me, or whatever their current life situation can fit as far as resistance days. But with the goal of like getting them to meet or exceed the physical movement guidelines, 2 resistance training sessions a week, 150 to 300 minutes of cardio. Is that up to date? I think is it 150?
That sounds about right. 150 moderate minutes, or I want to say 75 intense minutes.
Yes, right. Yeah, the more intense, the less you need. And so, yeah, I also like I've definitely over the last couple of years, I think from your influence, Jim, of like starting to like ask them better questions about their solo sessions, about like where they're focused, like, or do they find themselves like losing focus in the sessions, and like I don't know, mental enjoyment being maybe an underrated training variable that I try to shine light on, so that like just so they can like build autonomy. Like a high autonomy might be and there are different aspects of autonomy. This isn't just the all-encompassing definition of autonomy, but in my mind, like high autonomy is like going on a hike for the sake of, and so the enjoyment of the activity being high autonomy. And low autonomy might be like boot camp, where like you're not going on that hike for it's like out of reward and punishment. And so
but you still chose to do it regardless. And I feel like with autonomy, it's really, you can't, if you don't know anything about the skill or the process of lifting, I think you don't have maybe all of the tools required to be fully autonomous. But the autonomy kind of starts more baseline, like I wanted to go to the gym to learn how to become more autonomous because there's a process of the autonomy that you develop. You develop autonomy to go to the gym on your own, whether you start out with a friend or something and you dependent kind of on them, which isn't bad necessarily, but at some point, you always have to have, this is something that I'm doing for me. And then it's like, okay, how can we stack autonomy on top of that to like, I want to do, what were you saying before, your pin shrugs or something? Or what?
Yeah. A max effort set of 62 unloading pin shrugs.
Yeah.
For no reason whatsoever other than to do a set of 62.
And the key is though, you actually had that in your head, that exercise even exists. You know what I mean? Because like if you don't even know, I mean, you can make things up surely, but I think experience and like testing new things helps to build some of that autonomy. Because then you have to figure out, I also want to do sets of 62.
I mean, it's a fairly simple process, Jim. I see a loading pin, I see some plates, I think, those things could go together. I see a shrug handle, I think I have traps. When I did that set of 62, it's not like I had the number 62 in my mind. I was just like, I'm just going to go until I either have to stop or I die. I told this guy that was there with me, I said, listen, man, I'm going to do this thing. And if I don't make it, tell everybody I love them. Yeah.
You get rhabdo. You go to the hospital.
It sounds dramatic, and I know it probably sounds dramatic, but maybe that's part of the autonomy for me too.
Yeah. Well, and something I feel like I've seen you talk about in some of your one of your social media posts of like a lot of people do it for the gram. Like that's low autonomy. That's reward and mostly reward, not punishment. Like I feel like lifting out of a place. I mean, at least I feel like I've heard you talk about the negative impacts that social media has had on the strength training community. And I don't know if you have more. Maybe I'm misconstruing your feelings on it.
You're right on. Yeah, I have a few things to say about that. I mean, I think just autonomy in general. I've always, I think, subconsciously striven for maximum autonomy in my training. I think for that reason, I'm extremely not coachable. I have tried working with people to give me some programming. And the moment that I'm like, why am I doing this shit? Like, why shouldn't I be just doing a set of 20 rep squats and then moving on to a different exercise? And they're like, well, no, you need to do this thing because it's more scientifically sound, I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. Obviously I've had people that have taught me things here and there, and I've taken advice from smarter and stronger people than myself, but just to have someone do my training for me has never worked out. I've also really been resistant to things like competition, even though I've done some before, because it externalizes my motivation. I'm in the gym for a specific purpose, and we'll get to this later, but it has to do with the choosing of one's own suffering. But the moment that I start to train for an external event like a competition or whatever, it's not mine anymore. I don't have full autonomy over it. I have to make decisions to do well in that competition rather than things that I actually want to be doing. And it just, it's not my suffering anymore. And if it's not my suffering, there's no point.
Yeah. I think I want to make a comment about autonomy and motivation, because motivation is really complicated in a sense, because we all have different like reasons. We have different regulators of our motivation, and you could be motivated to participate in an activity due to external regulators, like peer groups and grouping, out grouping, and wanting to be a part of the group. You could be motivated because it's just something to strive for, and there's that enjoyment of that external experience. But I made a post on Instagram about like the science of motivation, and one of the key things is having some level of autonomy that you're comfortable with. Not everyone wants the autonomy that you have to be motivated for something, but having enough autonomy where that, I think there's always that threshold, like how much autonomy is helpful for the individual to continue doing what they're doing. Ideally, they have enough autonomy. Usually people are more comfortable having more autonomy if increased autonomy also increases competency, or perception of competency. So you doing what you've been doing or what you want to do yields greater strength outcomes, for example, or more muscle mass, and you notice it and you enjoy that. And then kind of the last thing, and it's interesting because a sense of belonging is also really important when it comes to motivation. But that doesn't necessarily mean belonging with people. It could also be belonging in like the universe, and how specific that is to the individual is going to be individual, right? I don't necessarily need like 75 people to be feeling like I've, belong in powerlifting, but having like even just you two, if you two are the only people that I've ever trained with, and me engaging in powerlifting help me feel more belonging in our relationship, probably would be good, but other people need like 18 people at the same time to be like, they need a big peer group, basically.
Right, a team, a community, whatever you want to call.
Yeah, right, exactly. Which isn't bad either, at all. It's just I'm not like that, and so I think that kind of goes to the idea of like suffering, and I don't have a similar approach in that way. Like I view training as some level of like difficulty and challenge, and I really enjoy the challenge and the struggle to get better. But at the same time, I've had very negative impacts on my training and also my life when I've gone to the gym and tried. There's an approach where you go to the gym and you try so hard that you feel like if I go home now, I will be in a decent amount of like pain. And I think there's a threshold for everybody. But for me, for a long time, the threshold was very low for it to be effective and for it to increase my desired outcome. But it sounds like for you, a relatively high amount of like perception of suffering is maybe required to keep you stimulated or motivated.
Yes. I think another point on autonomy that I have to say is I've never really felt like I had a choice about going to the gym. From the moment that I stepped foot in there and I limped out of there after those 20 sets of lunges or whatever, it was like, I need to keep going back there. Mm-hmm. Because that was the first time in my life that I was able to choose a suffering that was my own. I think in this life, we are all handed a certain degree of suffering. It could be a very full plate. It could just be a little speck, just a little bite-sized Snicker bite-sized little bit of suffering. And I think for some people that have a very full plate of suffering, that's enough. That's plenty. They don't really feel like they need more. And to me, I felt like the suffering that I had experienced in my life up until then, it wasn't anything that I had chosen really. It was kind of just things that had happened to me as a course of being a human being. And I was like, I have to keep choosing this. And I still feel that way. I have to keep choosing it. Um, so is my degree for tolerance of suffering high? Probably, yeah. But that suffering that I choose in the gym gives my life a lot of meaning, and it gives my mind a lot of clarity. And it's very therapeutic. And it doesn't replace therapy, of course. I mean, it's just like Joe Sullivan said, if the gym is your therapy, get the fuck out of my gym, which I think is a fantastic quote. But it's very perspective changing sometimes, and it can certainly shift my mood for the better, because like if I've had a shit day, and I can still come in and do an RPE 10 set of squats and be like, all right, there's another thing that I survived, and I did that to myself. That's agency.
Do you make a judgment on the loading that it like happens on those days? Like, you go to the gym and you're not like expressing a stronger day. The weight that's on the bar is lower than expected or something. Like how do you approach that?
Well, I've compiled a very detailed and meticulous list of all the PRs that I've ever hit, all the rep PRs on every single variation that I do, and I do a fair amount of things. So I usually come in there with a plan A, and a plan B, but they're both going to push myself to a certain degree. And when I'm in the gym, I'm in there to hit a PR of some kind. I hate doing weights that I've already done. Like, to me, what's the fucking point? I've already done that. Why would I do it again? You know what I mean? Certainly not the philosophy of most gym goers, I think. But the other thing is, even if I have a shit day, I'm still going to try that hard set. There's just no reason for me not to, unless something is going horribly wrong. And I don't trust my warm-ups. In fact, if my warm-ups feel too good, I'm wary. I'm cautious. I'm like, ooh, this feels too good. Maybe that means that my top weight is not going to feel so great. I mean, I squat 650. Sometimes it does not start feeling right until I'm like in the mid fives. Like 405 might feel like garbage. 455 might move so slow. And I'm just like, I need to put more weight on to determine what's going to happen today. Like, imagine if I had just stopped at 455 because it didn't move great. Like, I wouldn't have shit.
I think you also, I mean, my observation is that you get in flow really. I mean, you zoned in from my observations when you're training. Do you feel that way? Like it seems like the way you're even describing it is like you're creating a bubble for yourself.
I think so, yeah. I train at Los Campeones Franklin. I've been training there for, God, 11, 12 years now. And I come in there and I make eye contact with the front desk guy, and he'll put on the Iron Maiden playlist downstairs in the dungeon.
Hell yeah.
That's where I go to train. Everybody else can listen to the rap, but down there, when I'm there, they'll play the 80s hair metal and shit.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just there lifting weights. That's all it is. We're just lifting weights. And it is kind of a bubble because I'm there to lift the weight, as simple and reductionist as that might sound. And I'll talk to people and people will come up to me, but when it comes time to do like the last warm up or the final set, I don't talk to people. I just gather my emotional energy, and I just do my visualization if I want to do it. And I try to make sure that my emotions or fear or whatever else I may be feeling does not get out of control. And sometimes there's a lot of fear before a big squat set or something, right? You're just like, ooh, am I going to die here? Have I lived a sufficient life to be all right with my life coming to an end here? Again, a little dramatic.
What do you think about that, Tyson?
Well, I've watched Mike lift at least a handful of times, and I think and I mean, it's okay for people to come up and talk to you, but like, I do my best to, I don't know, and not necessarily facilitate Mike's bubble. Not that
Your presence is always welcome and appreciated.
Thank you. But I just try to observe of like Mike's process, because I from my observation from the outside, Mike does go into this flow, and I think to handle those kinds of loads, I mean, I guess it could all be relative. For anyone to handle a true like RPE 10 set, like takes a mentality that you wouldn't necessarily. I mean, maybe some days you could walk in cold and just squat your max, but like that ramp up of like, I mean, it's warm up sets are 4. You're like turning on your nervous system, but like, yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch. Honestly, it is, and I think it's a little infectious too. Like I definitely try different things when I'm lifting around you. Like,
I've seen that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and so it's fun. It is certainly a different mentality, but I think it definitely has its allure too, and usefulness. I think even if you don't need that much of a stimulus to potentially get a little stronger the next time you train, the mental practice, psychological practice of going there has something that feels like existentially fulfilling. Like I remember this one set of bicep curls. Mike was doing chain bicep curls, which I'd never done before. And I mean, thankfully at that point I had been SIBA. I was running a program SIBA wrote for me, the Holistic Strength Athlete, and I had a fair amount of direct bicep work. So my biceps were trained, thankfully, because I might have got rhabdo. But yeah, Mike was doing the there's like the curvy easy bar and just a fuck ton of chains on, and it looked fun. This like the strength curve of it looked different than than other bicep curls I've done. Something about the way that the chains move. You have to like avoid like packing yourself with the chains. Anyway. And so I took it to like what I would say true failure. And I don't remember how many reps it was. It was probably like 40 to 50 reps.
It was a lot.
And like, it was like a little bit of rest pause. Like I probably hit failure, took a few breaths, hit failure, took it but I like went until I couldn't, in a way that I would say it was uncommon for me. I think I often leave a few in the tank most of the time. But it was really like, it was a set that like, I felt a lot at once. Like I was very aware of the music. I was very aware of my body. I was very aware of like, it felt like an ascended state almost. It was a really, like I remember that set very distinctly. And I would say I have a lot of sets that I probably don't remember, but that one I really remembered.
It was beautiful to watch. I knew exactly what you were going through.
Yeah. And so it's something that, yeah. So I guess those are my thoughts on.
I think as I'm approaching that top set, I start to block out kind of more external stimulus and be a lot more selective with the internal stimuli that go through me. But then once that set is over, it's like the world just opens up again. It's like walking out of a tunnel or something, and I just get a big emotional release when I'm done, and I'm just so happy. I made it. I survived. I hit a PR. I know that I get to come back to it or something similar in a few days, but for now I can just relish in that for just a few seconds and everything's good. Everything's fine.
It reminds me of sprinting in high school, like sprint training, when you didn't ever know what was going to be done for the day. Like the coach never told you ahead of time. Well, sometimes they would, but I never really knew what it meant, But they're like, hey, you're going to be doing sprints up the hill for set 10 like hill sprints or whatever. And it always sucked. I hated it. And I also got injured a lot. And that's another reason why I have a different approach than you do to the gym, because I have so many more negative experiences with pushing myself past that like threshold of like, okay, there's suffering, and then I'm suffering without a lot of benefit. And for me, that's a relatively low threshold. And I didn't love that for a while. And it took a time to accept that is a thing that happens to me. And I have, clients that have experienced similar things where, they've been trying to do the program that makes them feel like they finally, have pushed through this mental barrier, but they only really do that for a few weeks or maybe less until they start noticing higher levels of, pain and aches that are impacting their daily life. And again, that's not to say that everyone's going to feel that way, but I think it's really important that if you do, you got to find that threshold that's effective for you, because I think a lot of people are also doing this for some objective measurements of success or improvement. And it's really hard to make progress when, it's hard to make progress in a specific skill if the skill that you're trying to get better at is also physically causing you like deterioration of your body. It is technically, but not to a degree where you're feeling like your bicep is tearing off. You know what I mean? Like, it's just probably not ideal for optimal adaptation.
Right. It's, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I do also feel like a lot of people's threshold is so low in that sense that they just don't get any adaptations, because the moment that it really starts to feel like actual suffering or like it starts to suck, they're like, ooh, I better stop. It's just, I don't think that's conducive, really, which is why, I like making these semi-sarcastic Instagram posts where I'm just like screaming at my audience in alternating caps.
I saw some.
And one of the things I said was, if your top set of the day is a singlet RPE 7 with 3 reps in reserve, I watch that and I ask, what the fuck are you even doing in the gym? And I think there's some truth to that, right? Like, I feel like I see a lot of people doing that. And then when the weights...
I would never.
No, Jim would never.
And then these same people will complain that the weights are heavy when they're heavy. And it's just like, I think you're missing the point, man. But I would also not recommend that most people train the way that I train, because I think what I do works for me, and it's been developed over a decade.
Right. You've been doing a lot. You had a lot of, I just come up with the idea. Well, I didn't come up with it, but I learned a word, like a micro test. I learned it. It's also known as a unit test. And typically it's used in the Agile framework for coding. But the way that they implement it is, if you have an idea for, I looked at this morning, by the way, because I'm making a post and I could be completely wrong, but of the 10 minutes I spent learning about this idea, they use it to test a certain type of like coding algorithm without fully implementing it into the full string of code. And from my understanding, that allows them to test like different iterations of a similar thing to see if it's more efficient or more effective. And I think that's the way that I like to approach like changes in training. They don't always have to be tested and then implemented for the long run, or a long period of time, I guess. You could even make a micro test happen within like a deload, or we call them like pivot blocks.
I know what a deload is. I just don't do them much.
Well, because that's one of the things I learned about with the GZCL like guy. I don't know if it's in the program, but he makes a lot of posts on like how you don't need to deload, and I have like my thoughts on that idea. I think he's probably correct, but I don't.
He's the guy that's trained for about 1,200 days in a row, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. And obviously he didn't need it. And I don't think a deload is necessary, but I don't think that means it's not useful or that there's not a utility to it.
I would agree. Yeah.
And so anyway, how do you approach the longer term? Do you even have like a longer term plan? Are you very more agile and that the day-to-day sessions kind of are dictated by some feeling or emotion or desire?
My long-term goal is to progress everything in my progress chart. It's a document that's, 10 pages long, full of variations and reps and sets. And I just want to progress all of them. Yeah, it's my only long-term goal. And it keeps growing. The other day I did this new exercise that I hadn't thought of before. It's this axle seal shrug. You know what a seal row is, I would assume? Yeah, so I was seal rowing the axle, which I also hadn't done before. And then I thought, I wonder what it would be like to shrug weight in a horizontal position like this. And I did that, and I just got this like nasty pump in my traps and spinal erectors. And I was like, okay, I guess this is getting added into my document now, and this is now a thing that I can do. I mean, that list is just going to keep growing. You know, I think as I get older, I'm 32 now, I have to be somewhat intelligent with my training. And I do think the variety that I have in my training helps with that. Like I don't have just low bar squats that I can train. I have about 30 different types of squats that I could train on any given day. And it's like, if I know I'm not going to do well with low bars that day, well, let me look at my other 29 options and I can find something to progress. The goal is just to keep progressing indefinitely. I mean, I just want to be strong as fuck in a lot of different things. Yeah. And I just want it to be a mindful, all encompassing, absorbing experience that I can translate to all other areas of my life. Because I think training does not end in the gym. It begins in the gym, but it continues everywhere else if you know how to translate it.
Yeah, I like that. That was really good. I mean, maybe just because it's just circling in my brain, but like maybe not in the defense of a single out of 7, but like I think a lot of the accurate rating of like 3 in the tank, like a single out of like doing something that's. So I guess we said it in the last podcast, which is gone to the abyss.
Sorry.
Take what you can do for 6 reps and do it for 12.
Grab a weight you can pick up 6 times and pick it up 12 times. Yeah, that's what my mentor Taylor said.
Yes. And I remember, and I was in this circle of people when he said that for at least the first time I heard it. I don't know if you had heard it before then, but like, that would assume that someone doesn't know how to like rate their RPE. Like if that's them doing 12 at 10, like they just thought that they could only do it for 6. There was a limiter, a self-governance. But I guess I don't necessarily have anything to say other than that. Like that's more of like their perceived barrier. Like they're not trained enough. They're not connected with their body enough to know where their limits lie. And you don't really know till you find out. Like I think, honestly, anything over 1 to 2 in the tank is really hard to rate. And maybe I think as you become sensitive, you can get more and more accurate with it. Like it was really interesting. We had a coaching call, and one of the coaches on the team, Siba, he's a very strong and thoughtful person, which I tend to like, strong and thoughtful people.
You're weak and thoughtful. That's cool.
We'll be friends soon. I mean, I'm not, my threshold for strong is relative too.
Maintain your thoughtfulness and keep training, and then
we can talk. We could talk. But like going into his meet, I think he said, and Jim, you can fill in the gaps if I'm misquoting him, but like most of his sets were like RPE 5-6, but he like made this wave of momentum. But Siba is someone who can hit a true at 10. Like I remember at kilos when he was deadlifting, like he fainted, passed out multiple times.
Dude, Siba passed out every time he deadlifted pretty much. And then the next week he did like a 2-count pause squat for like 7 or something. And on like the 4th rep, he passed out right above the pause. The bar like slid down his back and fell on the ground. He also fell on the ground. He got up. I believe something happened digestively in his stomach, and he had to go to the bathroom and clean up. I'm pretty sure it involved him removing his underwear. Came back and warmed up again for the 2-count pause squat. And I just remember thinking, I would never do that. That is incredible. I'm glad that's kind of something that drives. I'm like, Mike would do this shit.
I would absolutely do that. I wouldn't even change my pants.
But Steve is someone who like I have never seen someone train that close to the do or die, but like he was just like died. Like he went to the limit to the degree that I've really only probably seen you, Mike, train. And so like, but he's someone who knows what 5 in the tank is, and his 5 in the tank is probably what a lot of people might rate. Like, I mean, I can't make assumptions. I'm like projecting imaginary people's rating of RPEs. And so I can just like create archetypes of like people who do that. But like, but you know, that's not that, because I mean, I'll do single out of 7. I'm just training. and I'll do other things too. I'm trying to create a training effect so I can be stronger next time. And if my single out of 7 is stronger, next time, I'm happy. But it's not just because I did a single out of 7. It's because I did all my other squatting. It's like a test. So, and not that I do that single, but I've just like, I say that I think mostly because I spent a season of life where I trained at what I would consider a true 8 RPE, like 2 in the tank, fairly frequently at relatively high volumes. And I was doing like templates and stuff. So I was maybe not personalizing the training. I was still like learning. I was still like trying things and seeing what I could learn from them. But I got so mentally burnt out. Like a true at 8, like if you look at my video, maybe if I can find it, I'll show you, of me doing like a 5 rep max squat. And the first rep is so fucking slow. Like you're like, oh, is he going to do another one? And like, and then it's second, and then like the third one, and they get slower and slower. But I was like really finding where the limit is. So like a true 8, I feel like I've learned to train to like what a 2 left in the tank is.
Well, what you're describing, is that really an RPE 8? Because that sounds like an RPE 10. If it's a 5 rep max and you did 5 reps, where's the other?
So sorry, I was just saying for reference of like, I think I know what at 10 feels like.
Okay. That makes sense.
And so I got psychologically really burnt out. And so, and then I had like a persistent low back pain, and there's other factors, but like now I would say a lot of my training is like at 6, 7. Like I do a lot of my training volume, and I'll still like go there, especially if I'm feeling it on the day. Like I want, like you saw me doing the 20 rep squat the other day, and that was like the most weight that was the most weight I've done 20 reps for. And I was doing 300 acceleration tempo squats for triples before that, and my squats were just feeling really good, and I probably worked up to 3 at 7. But then I've been in both waters. Like I've been at like I feel like I really have experienced the benefits of leaving 3 in the tank, like psychologically, and for like creating a wave of momentum in my training so that I can be at my best. But I also have taken done 20 rep squats to failure. But I've at least tasted a little bit of what I think I perceive your training to be. So I'm just saying, like, on one hand, I don't think that many people are hitting a true at 1 at 7. But I also,
I mean, it's an archetype that I wanted to
absolutely
laugh at a little bit.
And I think it's good because there are probably people who might benefit from some self-awareness that they have a lot more in the tank than they think they do.
When I said I haven't done any programs, really, I lied. I've done one program several times, and that would be Smolov. Smolov for squats. And that is kind of different to what I normally do, because it's a lot of volume, and you end up with a little bit in the tank on each set, but it's a fuck ton of sets. It's
so many sets.
It's 4 sets of 9 the first day, 7 sets of 5 the second, 5 sets of 7 the third, and 10 sets of 3 the fourth day. And the reason that I've done those is, one, to get a shit ton of squat reps in and to like really drill my technique and stuff. But it was also for the mental challenge. It was like I know this is going to suck, but I also know if I can do that first set, I will eventually get through all 10. Like I will get through the 36 or however many sets per week there is. And that is a different mentality than just doing one set of however many, having nothing in the tank, then moving on to something else and doing that again, and then just doing that for 3, 4, 5 exercises, which is my standard training session. But it was also kind of nice to just do all the small offsets and just walk out of the gym and be like, okay, that was also something.
I think it goes back to the thing I said in the beginning of the podcast, that I think understanding the mechanistic ways in which we adapt to various stimuli is important. But if you ignore the fact that there are also psychological adaptations and cravings that people have, you can really miss a lot, especially if you're coaching. A lot of people that listen to this are either trying to coach themselves or coach other people. And, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is to share the fact that there are so many ways to create a useful adaptation. And this might be one that people are afraid of or would not do because they didn't know anyone has done it. And maybe if they have, they haven't had positive stories about it. But I also think that having a positive story can really be motivating because it's like, oh, someone did that before.
I feel like people used to train the way that I train like way more than they do now.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the golden age of, say, bodybuilding, right? You watch those videos of Arnold and Tom Platz doing their sets. It's like they're not leaving anything in the tank. They are completely spilling the contents of the tank all over the ground.
Yeah.
And I admire that. I admire that a lot. I mean, even right now, you watch a video of Tom Platz coaching somebody, it's kind of insane.
His book is like high intensity training, isn't it?
That's Mike Menzer.
Mentor. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was just listening to this webinar from Chris Beardsley this last weekend, and he's really into mechanistic like physiology and how muscles adapt to various stimuli. And his big argument is for like effective reps. Like he tries to figure out what is an effective rep for adaptation. And typically he argues for higher RPs, leaving less reps in the tank. Because we're going to all have a different like limiter for our voluntary, like maximum controlled contraction. But then there's also going to be a limitation just like in how the body perceives a certain repetition at a certain threshold. And TLDR, he made the suggestion that if your goal is hypertrophy, there's very minimal marginal gains from pushing past sets of 8 at RPE 8. Now, you can do many sets of RPE 8, sets of 8, but pushing past that in his understanding of like muscle physiology, and it's pretty great, is that you're probably going to have a much more effective use of your time doing more sets at slightly lower reps and 2 reps in the tank, but true 2 reps in the tank. And again, I think if you haven't actually tested this before, you're going to not know what that is. So you should push probably past it a few times and pull back. But then the other thing is, and this goes back to just not knowing what your true potential is on a given rep range. It's difficult to make training decisions if you don't know what that is. Like, if you are trying to plan and you are trying to mitigate like fatigue and keep the person enjoying it, because again, not everybody loves the struggle of the training. They like the progress in the training specifically, and they don't. For myself, I don't care if I get stronger and I didn't need to struggle as hard as someone else did to make the same growth. I'm happy because now I have more energy for other things that I can do in my day. I have more energy for coaching. I have typically better cognitive thought. I'm not like leaving the gym like, cool, I'm going to be sleeping now, because I did all of the things I could do in that 2 hours of the day. And so I just think that I'm also psychologically responding to that. And then that's how my athletes tend to depend on. That's what they want from me. Like, where is that threshold that's you're getting the most out of your time, the most out of your effort, and then the most results that they're coming to me for, which most often is squat, bench, and deadlift progress. And I have clients that'll come to me doing the most and they're beat up and they don't know what's happening. I pull it back farther than they thought they could even pull back, and they're still progressing. And I'm like, look how much more time you have now to do shit that you didn't have time for. And I think a lot of times it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, they identify as lifters, so that means that all the energy they have is going to be spent lifting. And so they don't understand a different world anymore that could exist where they still get stronger. They have time for things that they want to do outside of the gym, or they didn't even know that they had time for. And they're like, wait, shit, I have like 6 extra hours of my life where I'm not fatigued past like enjoyment. What else is life have to offer? Like, even going on like hikes, for example, I used to never want to do that because I'd be so tired from like, I did a lot of Smolov and like Shako style, I know not the same, but similar places in my early training days, and I would get hurt and I would have no more energy for like school, So I just think that's something to be aware of, and I think is interesting. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. It's a lot. I said a lot of things.
I think it's valid. Personally, I kind of enjoy the fatigue from training. And I still like being able to do all the other shit in my life, even if I am fatigued. I mean, I just don't really care if I have it. It's like it's life. You're not going to be not tired.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything to add. I feel like mental training, and like the mental enjoyment of your training is like an underrated factor. Like I feel like I spend a lot of time spinning my wheels, and a part of it too was I was very specifically cared about like my 1 rep squat, bench, and deadlift. Like when I listen to Mike's style of like he's like 30 squats to improve from that's a different satisfaction of improvement than like my estimated 1 rep max based on a single at an 8 didn't go up. I remember just being so burnt out of training when I think just I did what I would call doing like a lot of sets at 8. What for me I think was a true at 8 perceived exertion. But I just got mentally burnt out and I didn't enjoy what I was doing. But my training enjoyment is really high right now, but I'm still doing, I guess, a fair amount of sets at 8. I don't know. I guess don't have anything to add then.
Sometimes I don't really feel like I enjoy my training. In fact, I feel like quite often it's frightening and difficult and unpleasant, but that's why I do it.
Yeah, well, and something I forgot I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper on is the definition of suffering and choosing one's own suffering. Like I think I probably frame suffering in a mindfulness framework. And so Shinzen Young was author of Science of Enlightenment, one of the first books on meditation I ever read. And in it, he has an equation that pain times resistance equals suffering. And so you can have uncomfortable sensations. You can have, fear, pain, whatever, and your resistance to them will equate to the amount of suffering that you feel. And so when I do sets that are close to failure, when I go in really cold water, when I expose my body to really intense stimuli, like my threshold for cold water is, can I relax in it? Can I not resist in it? And so I would say when I'm sitting in 32-degree water, I want to, my target is no resistance. And I've had meaningful experiences in that state of like, it feels like there's nothing, but there's like, it's hard to describe, but for me in that moment, I'm not suffering. But if someone's resisting to cold water, it can be a really suffering experience. When I'm doing like a really intense set of squats, or like in that set of bicep curls, I had no suffering. I had elation. I had like this like aliveness that, I mean, sure, a lot of discomfort. My biceps were screaming, but I was so in the flow. I was so caught up in the moment that I found it to be a really empowering experience. So again, it's like, what do you call suffering? Like, but I guess I want to dive deeper on what you call suffering, because for me, if I'm not resisting that experience, I'm not necessarily suffering, but I'm choosing something hard.
I guess if you use the definition of suffering as pain times resistance, then I am not suffering in there at all. I think my definition of suffering that I've been operating on is just pain, discomfort, unpleasantness. Sure. But yeah, there is no resistance to it. I mean, during my squat sets, I smile between reps. Yes. It looks maniacal, but it works. Yes, it does. You've tried it yourself. It makes a difference. I think if you're under the bar doing whatever and you're like wincing in pain and shit, now you're resisting. But if you smile, well, now you've accepted it. Now you're really in it.
It's so important when it comes to rehab and managing like pain and injury. Is like you kind of have to embrace the fact that you've experienced pain and that it's now part of you to some degree. I find, at least anecdotally, that the rehab process takes a lot longer the less people accept that they have actually experienced something that's like slowing them down. I mean, me too. Like, I think that's one of the usefulness. It's useful to have a coach or a mentor or someone else in your circle that has experienced pain and has made it through that period of resistance and suffering, to then embrace it. Because the first time that you experience pain, you might not realize that there's another version of life. Like you might think that once you have a hip injury, after never experiencing that in your life, that is now going to be forever what you experience. But ironically, once you embrace that this might be forever what you experience, pain can actually you can let go of the pain, and it just kind of goes away over time, and I mean, there are ways to manipulate training variables as well, but I find that like a cue that I give a lot of my clients is I want you to think about the fact that you experienced this injury and minimize how often you're thinking about whether or not you're in pain, which is easy to say, but it is a very important slow process, because usually the first time you feel pain, you're like, all right, I have a hip, my hip's bothering me a lot. It's like, all right, 7 out of 10 pain or whatever that you call it. And then your first thought is it a 7? Is it a 6? Is it, what is it? What about now? What about now? What about now? And you always think, what about now? It's like, well, you're now searching for pain. And that can, I mean, it literally can create new neurological networks to increase nociception in that area, because you're actively trying to find pain in that area. And so you're going to find it. But if you can minimize how often you're thinking about it and think about what actually can you do that isn't the thing that you're scared about being prevented from doing. And I think that's why I really like the idea of you having like 30 different squat variations to try if maybe you're feeling weak or whatever. There's always other alternatives to the preset reality that you've written down on a piece of paper or on our training app. You can swap out the exercise for something else that is more enjoyable and you can get excited about or get in flow with. And I try to encourage that for my athletes that are feeling pain, because again, they're thinking so much about what they can't do. It's such a relief when you realize that like leg press can actually be really fun in the event that a competition low bar squat isn't. Whether you're stronger at it or not, if you're in pain and leg press isn't painful, I guarantee you're going to have a better time with leg press, and that doesn't mean it's a negative deviation either. I think that's, people are afraid that if they deviate from the main thing, that the adaptation, like they won't make any adaptation from a different thing and that there's no transfer. It's like, well, you're using your legs, you're using your quads, you might not be using your back, but once your back is more resistant or has adapted to the older negative experience, hey, maybe we're in a good place now. We can go and do it again and it'll be fun. And it's not the lifter's fault for feeling these things, but I do find that knowing you can change and shift your mentality, your exercise, your protocol, and it's not going to make a huge difference either way as long as you're doing something. It can help with that, negative feedback loop that can be created.
As a physical therapist, I agree.
Yeah. Right, I forgot that's what you do, like
Mike's a
professionally.
physical therapist too.
Do you find that helps with your clients that you work with too?
Well, as a disclaimer, I'm not the cool kind of physical therapist that you think of when you think of a physical therapist. I work in the hospital with acutely, severely ill people, not necessarily someone who's like shoulder or back hurts. I work with people that have had heart attacks, strokes, COPD, COVID, really anything that lands them in the hospital needing a level of hospital care. So the things that I do are really very different. I make sure that a patient is able to perform the necessary functions of their home environment, essentially, and they have the functional capacity and endurance and strength to navigate that environment. So, if you're in there with kidney failure and your shoulder hurts, like, I don't give a shit about your shoulder right now. I care about, can you get out of bed and do a flight of stairs so you can go home instead of a care center? That's my job. But I think the principles kind of do apply. Especially with like post-surgical patients, right? I see people who have had 10, 15 spine surgeries. A lot of fucking spine surgeries.
So many spine surgeries.
Yeah. Spine surgeries.
a lot of money invested into the surgeon.
That's right. You know, and people's expectations about pain really shape how they behave, how they move, their prognosis. I've had some interesting experiences with pain. You know, I herniated a disc. God, I don't know, what was it? 2 years ago, deadlifting 705 for 3, I think. But because I'm a physical therapist, I was like, okay, it's, you know, a slightly herniated disc. I'll probably be okay. I went to work the next day. I was like, well, let me just see if I can get through today. And if I can't, then maybe I'm in trouble. I got through it. I got through it. 2 days later, I was front squatting like 80% weights. A week later, I did a set of 13 back squats, you know, and then I was pretty much pain-free within 2 weeks. But I think just like having received education about what pain is and isn't, and whether pain equals damage or not in school, and like having coached patients through that kind of thing was very influential for me. So even now, like if I'm in the gym and something's hurting, unless it's like severe, I just don't care.
I think I might have said this on a podcast before, but I had something like that happen to me, and I didn't have a herniated disc, but I was going for a deadlift max at the gym in San Diego, and Jordan Feigenbaum was there, and I like Jordan, and it was kind of cool to have him there, especially in that moment, because I was really sad because I almost hit a PR, but I failed, and then I immediately noticed like my hip was really irritated, and to a degree where it reminded me of the 3 years it took me to kind of get over the first time that I had like hip pain. And I remember him saying like, well, it's not a tumor. Who cares? You know, like you're not going to die. You didn't break anything. You know, you're feeling pain. That's fine. But like, you're not going to die. And he wasn't being rude about it. I think some people could view that as rude. One of the phrases I hate the most because it doesn't give any context is that it's all in your head.
Yeah, that's a shitty thing to say.
It's like, yeah, of course it's in my head. So is every other aspect of my life condition is in my head. You don't know how I'm seeing the world, you know, and how I see the world is really the only thing that matters to me, you know, like in this context. So he didn't say that, but it is in my head. And so I have to be aware of that and accept it. And like you said, at that point, I'd spent so much time learning about pain that even though I know I could get better, it's still, the question is like, how long is this going to take? You know, when will it get better? And it took me a few days of, hey, can you walk? Yes. Can you go to the grocery store? Yes. Can you go to your house? Yes. Like, I just reminded myself of all the things I could still do. And then remember, like, can I deadlift with a lower load without irritating myself? Yes. Can I switch stances? And does that feel better? Yes. The experience that you have is important, and it is yours, and it is, of course, in your head, but it doesn't mean it's not real. It is very real.
Just like you said in Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, even if you are someone that has having a like hallucination, telling someone it's all in your head is probably not going to be useful in that scenario either. Because like, yeah, and there's a monster right next to you, and that is real to me. So can you move? We got to get away from it. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you would handle that, but I still imagine that if you're having an experience like that, it might not be very useful to just like discredit it so simply. But I'm not an expert in that at all. I'm hardly an expert in pain. But knowing about pain as a coach, I feel like if you aren't aware of how pain works or about the mechanisms for which you can improve the pain experience or help the athlete through it, you're very limited. You're very limited as a coach.
Yep. Or if you say some dumb shit like no pain, no gain.
Yeah. Right.
That's a problem.
Right. And like, man, it's like, how? What? There's muscle growth doesn't occur unless pain. I don't know if you knew that. Pain, nociception is a precursor for muscular adaptations. You can look in the PubMeds. It's not in there, just to be clear. But imagine if it was. I mean, then sure, like that movie, Pain and Gain with The Rock and what's his name? You haven't seen it? Have you seen it? Oh, I don't even know if I've seen it. I just remember the movie when it came out. It was like The Rock got on anabolics, and so did from Boston, Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg also was on the drugs, and they're like drug dealers, and like they're lift weights. Like I don't really know. I think that was the movie. Is that the drug dealers, they lift weights, and they had to run away from cops or something. I really think it was just like a way for Hollywood to like promote The Rock again after his like fall from the Hollywood. Because after that, he's in like every movie. All of a sudden, he's in like fucking Jumanji. Mark Wahlberg, luckily didn't need to stay on anabolics, but The Rock, man, he's a big dog. And he's not natty. So here it is first. He will deny it because he needs to deny it to make you guys believe in the like heteronormativity of like what it means to be a man. And it means to be like The Rock. But anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. I think Rock is really cringe. You can disagree with me. That's cool. I think all three of us have kind of a connection point in that we're aware of how we're experiencing training. And that kind of goes into the mindfulness of training, or even of life, but how I think training can provide some insight on like what effective mindfulness is. And Tyson is our resident mindfulness guru. He's taught me a lot about it, at least, and like what it means and what it doesn't necessarily mean. Maybe you can talk about that for a second. What mindfulness even is.
It's kind of like the word sports. Like if I say the word sports, I could mean a lot of different things depending on the culture and the rules and the paradigm that you're operating out of. Generally, like almost like it could be within or without a religious context, but there are a lot of different systems in which you improve your baseline sensory clarity, equanimity, and concentration. It's not limited to those three. There are other aspects too, but those are like a commonality between a lot of different meditation or mindfulness, techniques, technologies to improve your baseline. Sensory clarity, equanimity, and concentration. So that's a decent starting framework, I think. And yeah, there are a lot of different systems, a lot of different maps, depending on what tradition. But I mean, you can look at Christian mysticism. You can like every major religion has some form of like improving those qualities, and they'll have other aspects of like, in Buddhism, there's like morality, and there's so I guess as a basic definition, that's kind of where I start. And so how you go about doing that, I mean, is generally like leading with your strengths. Like find something that you align with, something that suits you, whether it be aesthetically or morally or whatever. And then hopefully through experience, you experience some improvement in those qualities. So start with that, I think. Mike, I feel like we've had conversations about mindfulness, which I enjoy talking about quite a bit. And I certainly think it applies to the training experience, or it can be. It should. So yeah, I guess I'd be interested to hear your thoughts or experiences on. I guess we can start with the relatedness between two, but we can even branch off into just mindfulness as a topic too.
I'll quote Taylor again. When you grab a weight that you can pick up 6 times and you pick it up 12 times, you're never more present than you are in that moment. And I think that's true. You simply cannot complete sets like that unless you're right there, fully in the experience. Your mind can't be elsewhere. It's not going to work. And I've certainly had situations where my mind was not where it needed to be and the set went to shit. And that's why I went to shit. But I do think that the mindfulness that one experiences during training, even if it's just for a few brief moments, and I do think that one of the reasons that I train in this manner is because I have to be mindful during those sets. It kind of increases the time that I spend being mindful in the gym. I wouldn't be getting those moments as much with lower intensity sets. But I think it translates a lot to just my regular life. I like writing haiku. I think there's a lot of parallels between training really hard and writing haiku. Because to write a good haiku, you just kind of have to observe something. You can't really judge it. You just have to be with that thing, either the physical object or the thought that you're having. And then you just need to be patient enough for your mind to make a connection. And you can't do that if you're trying to force it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I'll maybe come up with like one line of a haiku or two out of the three, and then the third one will elude me, and like it'll elude me for like days or weeks even. And then all of a sudden I'll just solve it, just kind of out of nowhere. And usually just happens in those quiet moments, the quiet moments in my mind. Yeah.
That's cool.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that really draws the parallel very well. But
I mean, I can relate to it. I mean, I'm a novice haiku writer. Like I'd say I maybe have, I don't know, half a dozen, maybe a dozen original haikus that I feel like I've like kind of kept track of. I mean, I'm sure, but it's an interesting, like I definitely can feel the parallels, or I can relate to what you're saying. Like if I try to think through it, it doesn't like ring to it. There's a kind of almost getting out of the way that my like, and that's what I find in my lifting too. If my mind is trying too hard to overthink these different things, like sometimes I just need to get out of the way for it to go smoothly, because overthinking it while you're doing it can mess you up.
One time I remember I was just sitting and meditating and just thinking about like the art of haiku in general, and I could just, I don't know how to explain it, I could just like see millions of haiku, just billions of haiku in the world just floating around, and every once in a while one of them is just bing in my head, and I was like, oh, that's what it is, that's how it should be.
That reminds me of the creative process of like any and like making content, I guess, whatever that happens to be. Like at first it's really difficult to see how, because what you're doing is you're taking something you're observing in the world and then translating it into a certain medium or format. Like haiku, I think, is one of those mediums. And I think at first, like for example, if you've never used a camera before, you understand that the camera exists and you can take pictures with it. But I think you don't necessarily, the way your eye sees something isn't necessarily how you're going to take the picture initially, because like at first there's all these things in the house, and nothing necessarily stands out to you because there's so many things. But as you start taking more pictures of things, I think there's like a pattern recognition that is developed where I see, that, I don't know what that is, but it's the thing that sticks out to me. This like looks like hair. Go. Witch's hair. I don't know. It's like really offensive.
It's a plant, but
it's a plant.
Yeah.
But like it sticks out to me. And like if I were to take a picture of that and I wanted to emphasize like how I'm feeling, I'd probably get pretty close to it and take a picture upwards into it. And I think that would give it a lot of like depth or meaning, or just it'd be cool looking. And that's also style that you develop within the medium, because there's a billion ways you can take a picture, and there's probably there's a structure to a haiku, and you have to follow that structure. Similarly, a video isn't a photo, there's differences in that, and then how you develop it. And like I imagine even like the font that you choose could make an impact on how the haiku is observed. I don't know if it would matter, but the point is you're getting better at pattern recognition, and then the better you can be in flow, you eliminate all of these things that are not the pattern recognition of like observing the world in the way that you are used to, and then you get better at it, and then like all of a sudden you're thinking about haikus walking down the street because you've been thinking about haikus and it took you so long to like develop the first few haiku. And it's similar with photos. It's like, what's going to look good? What is my style? What is it that I want to express? What words am I going to use, or what angles am I going to use, with the lens, or what lens am I going to use, and then it starts a snowball effect where you just get better and better and better and better and like you can't really get worse unless you stop, or the snowball hits a tree and explodes. You know, in that scenario, would you agree with that? Like the less you do haiku, or right, is there plural haikus?
I think it's just haiku.
Right, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. But do you notice that like if you think about them less, you have a tougher time bringing them back up?
Well, I just try to not ever stop, really. I try to write at least several a day if I can. And I think that's maybe contradictory to what I said about don't try to write haiku. But I think more accurately, I should say, I try to put myself into situations and states of mind where several haiku every day can arise. And sometimes they'll just like arise in conversation with somebody. I like when that happens a lot. You know, I like what you said about pattern recognition. I hadn't thought of that before, but I'm sure there's a lot to it. It goes on a very subconscious level, yeah. But you know, I almost view writing haiku the same way that I view training. Like now that I've chosen this to be an art form that I'm serious about, well, now I don't have a choice but to practice. You know, I must. That is my obligation, and I only release that obligation by writing haiku.
Right. Man, I just thought about that. The way that you're approaching your training is seemingly much more of an art than a science.
I appreciate that.
You
I
know?
think.
Yeah.
Because no,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's like it's just a different approach. Like it's like the weight, or the brush or whatever. You know, like the exercise toolkit you can build something with this massive toolkit, and I think the way that I approach it is more of a science first and then an art. But I mean, the more I coach, the more it's like science is cool, but at the individual level, you're doing hypothesis testing every block or every session. So it's like,
Yep, I hypothesis test every day.
right, it's like you just
My hypothesis is I'm going to get this for 1 more.
yeah, but that's what that's what it really is. And so you know, you use science, I think, to initiate the art, but it's always art. Like it's always art.
Well, the science is, of course, there has to be progressive overload. You know, of course, there has to be some basic degree of periodization. Do I really think about those things? Like, was I planning my workouts? No, not really. I just know that I'm going to be obeying those laws because they're immutable. I have no
Right.
choice.
Yeah, you can't get away from like the necessary. It's like you know that doing like 100 curls with a pencil, you know, isn't gonna elicit like a big bicep pump.
No.
You know what I mean? Like you know that.
Slapping on, 8 chains on the bicep curl and doing it for one. That's
Yeah.
probably not going to do much for me either.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think after 13 years now, I've kind of come to understand what works for me and what doesn't, as far as the ranges and the volumes and intensities and stuff. I can get away with relatively lower-ish volumes as long as my intensity's high. But
Yeah, you have to start with form. You have to you're taking, whether it be like a haiku, like 575, like taking a picture, like knowing, like learning the basic settings of a camera.
Or you do a lot of pottery.
I do
Recently.
pottery, yeah. Even with like meditation, like you start with scaffolding to build the building. Like a haiku is pointing at something beyond it. Like poetry is pointing, like a hard set, a transcendental set is pointing at something beyond lifting weights.
yeah,
Um,
I don't always know what it is. But
No, yeah, it's often like intangible. Like I think when you see a photograph that's moved you, it's not like, oh, that's because the ISO and aperture. Like, I know your mind probably like sees those things, but you can see those things, but you can also see what like it's pointing at.
You
Like,
still need to capture the picture.
yeah,
It can't be black if you wanted it to be bright, you know?
yeah, you're trying to point at an essence, and I feel like a meditative term, but maybe people wouldn't. I don't know how much they'd resonate with it, but like the finger pointing at the moon, like you're pointing at something that is intangible, that is beyond language and form. But you have to start with form. Like when you're training, you start with sets and reps and weights, but something else comes from it. And even with like mindfulness, like you begin with like basic like breath training. You return to the breath, or some meditation object. It doesn't need to be the breath. But it eventually becomes like do nothing, like don't manipulate your experience. There's a dropping away of all the scaffolding, and then something else is there. And so I think there's, at least I draw that commonality between all these different forms of expression. Like, you kind of need to start with form. Like, without form, there'd just be nothing. So.
Speaking of form, I think I've got to go now.
Great transition, Jim.
Yeah. Speaking of that, this. But this has been cool though. I'm glad. I think you guys won't know this, but we've already done this before. But I think this time it's a little bit more calm because we have a couch to sit on. It's not like the dry, dusty gym.
Well, I think Tyson's house in general just provides a certain atmosphere conducive to relaxation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No wonder you're a meditation master.
Dude, I know, right? He won't call himself that.
Well,
Just
no
a-
meditation master would admit such a thing.
Yeah.
Just a friend on the path. That's it. That's
I'll
it.
take it.